Yeah, I think it tells you. Yeah, there you go.
But go ahead and
Our,
continue with the randomness if you would like. We can have a whole show on randomness.
That's kind of our thing. But we should probably introduce ourselves first. Welcome to Wine, Women, and Words. I am Michelle, and with me, of course, is Diana.
Hello.
And we have Heather Webb back with us. We were just talking about it. This is the fourth time. So after the fifth time, we come to you to record. So
I love
not
it.
the next book, but the one after that. Just prepare.
We'll
I
have a
thought we
party.
upped that, to be honest, because we're actually going to have to make do on it because we're at the fifth time with Greer coming up. We're having Greer McAllister on, and we're at number 5, and we're going to have to make
I know
do. We're going to have to show up in
she's the
Boston.
first author to hit 5. So yeah, now we have to, after years of joking, this has been a running joke for years. After years of saying, after the 5th one, we come to you. We're going to have to actually do it now.
Mm-hmm.
But tonight we are here to talk about Heather's latest book, which of course is Strangers in the Night, which is about, well, I shouldn't tell people what it's about. For our listeners who aren't familiar with the novel yet, can you give us an overview of what the story is?
Sure. So I don't know if I said I'm Heather Webb. You said that. So Strangers in the Night is a novel of Frank Sinatra and Ava Gardner. So it follows a trajectory of their relationship that was very tumultuous, very scandalous, lots of emotional ups and downs. You get the glamour of Hollywood, and you also get a bit of the grit and the underbelly of Hollywood as well in this book. And I also explore a little of the studio culture. And you can see some sexism sort of running through the background too with Ava, which is, I think, sort of unavoidable in Hollywood. At least it always was. I think it still is today, but obviously they're trying to change that now. But so you get a lot of that old Hollywood vibe that we are all just so fascinated by, and very angsty love story. It was great fun to write it, and here we are, the week of release.
To say, so last night I was like, all right, I'm gonna finish it. I'm halfway through. I'm on a self-care, just mental health break after turning in my last book to my agent. So I'm like taking the week off, and I'm like, all right, I want to finish the book. And it was about 2:00 in the morning, and I'm about 100 pages shy. And the only reason why I didn't finish it was because I ended up down so many freaking rabbit holes with this book. I started like, all right, well, let's go ahead and like look up some stuff on Frank, and okay, and then it ended up going into Mia Farrow and her whole like thing where she adopted like 14 children, and then it was like, okay, back to Frank, back to this other stuff. So it was like, it's a book to easily fall down these wonderful rabbit holes at like 1, 2 o'clock in the morning and not actually finish the book.
Thank you. That's nice to hear. You know, that's exactly how my research went. So Frank Sinatra knew everybody, and the people he didn't know, there were maybe 5. Ava knew. So between the two of them, they knew everyone. And so every time I'm writing a scene, if there was a person that comes through the scene, I would have to pause in my writing and research that person. You know, like, is it plausible that Lana Turner would be on the studio lot at this time? And what film is she working on? Oh, and by the way, what's her personality? So I don't mess up her voice. I mean, I had to really, you know, Bogart and Lauren Bacall, I had to look up all of that, you know, the stuff about them. There's just so much. I had a Mia Farrow. There's so much I had to look up. And so the rabbit hole thing, you're not the only one. And and I pumped the pages full of these fascinating people that their lives overlapped with, because it's unavoidable on some level, just like we authors all know each other. You know, I mean, it's our industry, so obviously you're going to be running into people that you know all the time, so with recognizable names.
Was that something going in that you were prepared for, or was that something once you got in, you were like, oh no, this is far more research intensive than I was expecting?
I expected a good amount, only because they're in very recent history, really. I mean, Frank died when I was in college, so I knew that their lives would be pretty heavily documented, but it was still more than I expected. It was still more. And in fact, I hadn't written a biographical in quite some time. My first two books are biographical historicals. I've sort of strayed away from that style. I really enjoy mostly writing books where I have a lot of leeway in terms of the fictional elements and writing fictional characters, or a mix of the two, where I have a known person sort of in the background or as a secondary character as opposed to a main character. But this book, obviously, it had to be from their points of view. They are the stars of the show, and so I was right back in there doing what I had done many years ago, but it was still different. I mean, my other two were French Revolution and the Belle Epoque era, Gilded Age, early Gilded Age. There wasn't as much known. And even the stuff that's known is not really that heavily documented. So I had tons of leeway, not with Frank and Ava. So
yeah, I can imagine there's those, as Stephanie Dre had once coined them, the Wikipedia warriors.
Oh yeah, they're gonna come at me. I have that. The book just came out, so they haven't started bombarding me with everything that I don't know. But I suspect I've got some emails coming my way.
Gotta love those emails, right?
Yeah, and I'm sure there's probably, I already know there's a couple of mistakes. One of them was just a typo, and the other one was a blooper I made about when the Frisbee was invented. But that's not a big deal when you're looking at the scope of all of the Frank research I had to do and all of the Ava research that I had to do. So
I can imagine there's so much on Frank himself, and we'll touch on his mother in a moment because she's going to be a whole separate thing. I love Dolly Sinatra, and we're going to have a whole separate discussion on her. But given how much there is about him, was there anything about him that was surprising to you, or that you didn't expect?
So I'm getting this question, and I have to tell you, I didn't know that much about him personally. I mean, I loved his music. I knew his songs. I could pick out his songs all the time. I mean, I knew his voice. I knew a little bit about the Rat Pack. I knew he had legendary mafia connections, potentially. I knew where he was from, but I didn't know the stuff that I know now. So it's hard to say, was there one thing that was surprising? There was so much that was surprising. He lived this wild, very big life. He had a lot of character flaws. He got himself into trouble pretty often, whether it be with women, family, friends, the law. There was a lot going on in his life. He lived hard, he played hard, and he worked harder. So there's a lot to know. And there's a lot to be shocked by and riveted by. So any one thing I can't really say that there is, honestly. If you want examples, I can certainly give you examples, but there's so many.
I can certainly believe it. There's so much. I think when I was in college, my friends and I went through a Rat Pack.
But I was thinking about what you're saying about, while you were learning about Frank and getting to know him and the character flaws. He just sounds like such an ideal person to write a historical fiction story about, because he has, you don't have to invent anything. He has the flaws. He has the big life, the work hard, play harder. He has all of that ready to go. There wasn't really any creation necessary for his character.
Right. So here's the thing, because I've written novels that have real backdrops or real events with fictional characters. It's true, when you're writing biographical, you don't have to invent flaws. But what you have to do then with those flaws is actually in some ways a lot harder than inventing them, which is paint them in a way that is both accessible and in some ways sympathetic. And Frank is hard because because of all those flaws. I mean, he was a sexist, he was an egomaniac. He would fight with journalists. He was, boisterous, and he got his way. I mean, there were so many things about him, and yet he had a lot of really, really great qualities too. And so my challenge as a novelist is to not only show both sides of that situation, the pluses and the minuses, the good and the bad, but also to sort of tunnel into his heart and think about how all of his yearnings relate to themes in the book that I want to bring forth. And what I discovered with Frank in particular was, I think he had a lot I think he thought a lot about legacy, what he's leaving behind. Was he good enough? Did he produce enough? I mean, the man was a machine. I mean, he performed until he was well into dementia or Alzheimer's. I can't remember which one it is. I think it was dementia. And they had to put cue cards up for him so that he could remember the lyrics, to sing the lyrics. I mean, he should have not been performing anymore. But he just had this driving need to keep performing, to get the accolades from his fans, to let them know he was there and he was doing his thing and everything was going to be okay. And I think it, was a combination of fear of death and fear of what he was leaving behind, and if he was going to be forgotten. And that stuff's hard. And that's the stuff you have to find in fictional characters and in real life characters, real life people, and of course, Ava didn't have this same obsession. Her legacy and her deep sort of seated thoughts were completely different from his. So how they complement each other and how they, sort of hit and go in opposite directions like magnets that are flipped, was difficult. Not difficult, challenging. That was part of my job as a writer in this book.
And I love their relationship together.
Yeah.
That's been so fun, just getting into just reading about how volatile they were and how toxic they were. As much as they loved each other, they were really toxic together. And
they were horrible to each other.
Oh, horrible. There was one particular scene, and I'm afraid to say it because I'm afraid of it possibly being a spoiler.
It's okay. You can say it.
Okay, so
there's so much. It's all good.
So there's that one scene where he pretends to commit suicide. I think it was like me, if I'm not mistaken, because I was late and I was kind of sleepy when I read it. Possibly twice that he did it, because there was once with the pills, right, and then once with a gun. He's on the phone with her, and he's like, "That's it, I'm gonna do it," and he shoots a gun off, and so she panics and runs to him, and I'm like, oh my god, this is like toxic red flag behavior. Like this is
Rama, serious
so
run in the other direction kind of red flag.
Yeah, and like their relationship where she's trying to make this name for herself, like to be in the business, not necessarily, she didn't have, like you said, that legacy portion of it, but she was trying to get the good roles.
She was very ambitious. I mean, she was incredibly talented, and she wanted to make money, and she wanted to get good work, and she wanted to be proud of the things she produced. I mean, all that was still there.
And especially for a woman of that time period, I thought was a very interesting, because there was during that time period there, and even now, and it's not as much now as there was before, but like there's like a certain window that the women could actually be actresses before they were hung out to dry.
35 was retirement age for the love goddesses.
Yeah.
I'd be retired.
I'm thinking I didn't get good until 35.
Right?
Like we age like a fine wine. Come on. What do you know? I mean, I started knowing things, I think, in my early 30s. I feel like when I look in my 20s, I didn't know anything. And by the time I hit, 30, I started to know things. Mm-hmm. By 35, like, think of the depth you could bring to a role. It's just like, I feel like as you age in writing, and as you keep working on different kinds of books, and you have more experience, and you just bring some kind of richness to a role or to a book, or, any kind of writings, whatever, any kind of creativity that you don't have when you're younger. And that's exactly when they
Right.
started cutting them. They didn't care about the richness. They wanted their looks,
And I love how you pulled in that underbelly with the abortions. We'll go there with this book, how it was this open secret that these women, and it wasn't a fact of whether or not they wanted to have the children. It was a fact that they couldn't. It was like in their contracts that they couldn't have children. Remember?
It was kind of I actually need to verify that. I'm not sure if it was written in stone in their contract, but it was certainly an understood thing. And Louis Mayer, the owner of MGM, the CEO, he would take them aside and be like, don't get her pregnant to the husbands. And if a woman is running around in his studio who's not married and hooking up with various men, he'd be like, you need to marry one of them. This is bad PR. No one's going to follow you anymore. They're going to think, you're a hooker. They're going to, all this stuff. And that, as we saw at one point, when Frank finally left his wife, all the letters that Ava got outpouring from all over the country, people calling her horrible names, threatening her, all kinds of stuff. Him too, but mostly her. I mean, she bore the brunt of it.
And it also shows that as much as things change, so much has stayed the same. Like, how often has that happened with current stars? Like the whole Jennifer Aniston, Angelina Jolie, that thing that happened.
Oh, and it's
like,
their freaking business.
Yeah, 20 years ago. Yeah.
The other thing is, I just feel like we have, so many of us, we have really strict rules about what a relationship looks like and what love should look like. And we're not that simple. And I think there's a lot of different kinds of love, even different kinds of romantic love. If you've been married or been with somebody for a while, you can see that in your own relationship, how your love changes. It deepens in a lot of ways. And in other ways, some of the fun stuff goes away. And that's just part of longevity in a relationship. But I think that there's just a lot of different kinds of love. And I think not everyone makes room for that because of fear or because of trauma or because of, a million different reasons. But that's another thing that I feel like is a theme in the book. You see that Frank really, really loved Nancy. He didn't leave her because he didn't love her. I mean, he loved her till he died. They were very close. Even when he died, it was a different kind of relationship with Ava than what he had with his first wife. But I think that, that's one of those things it's really hard to define and put in a box. And yet we try. And then we accuse people and point fingers at people who don't live by our narrow rules. And they were both victims of that, I would say.
Yeah, absolutely. And then, go ahead, Michelle.
Sorry, I was just going to ask what, packing a lot of your really heavy material. What was that like as to take all that and try to translate it into a story like that?
It was really challenging, honestly. I have to say, the research bogged me down, all the facts, because I had to, I would start to write something and be kind of swept away into what I would do normally as a writer, is sort of feel my way through a scene, right? And I'd be like, wait, but was she here before this moment? And what, where was he and what was happening and what location? And was it the Palladium or the Paramount or the, whatever it is? And so I finally had to go and write a scene outline. And I don't usually, when I first started writing, I worked off a scene outline, but it was very general. This was a very specific scene outline with all of the historical information filled in each scene so that I wouldn't screw up the facts. I'm sure I still probably made a few mistakes, but I really did my best not to. But a lot of heavy material. So how do you balance all that? Well, the book was almost twice the length that it is now in the finished product. I had to cut just an absolute ton of material. It's funny, my editor, the first round I submitted it to her and she sent it back and said, well, you need to cut 100 pages. And she gave me a few other pointers, but that was kind of it. It's like, it's too long. You got to cut all this. And I just was kind of like, oh God, I knew that when I turned it in, but I didn't know what to cut. And she's like, well, let's, focus on these things. So it was a lot. I had to figure out how to manage all of it, but I knew I couldn't leave out things like heartbreak and suicide attempts and the abortions. These are all huge things in their relationship. And if the book is focusing on them together, that stuff had to go in,
Now, just for me, because I don't know, when an editor gets back to you and says, okay, you need to cut 100 pages, is it just like cut it, or do they kind of tell you this is kind of an area where you can focus on that could afford some trimming, or is that kind of at your discretion?
Depends on the editor, and it depends on where you're at in your career and how many books you've had with the editor. There's a lot of it depends. It depends. I've worked with this editor before. I've never had anyone that has told me to cut 100 pages. I've never needed to. And in fact, I usually have a really, really small editorial letter because as a freelance editor myself, I'm a little bit hyper about not just doing my own edits, but getting a bunch of critique partners to read so that when I turn something in, it's pretty polished. Because our editors are so overworked that they give good feedback, but they're still only one person. And I feel like you're only making your book stronger by getting their feedback along with other people's. So when she sent me that letter and said, she did give me some pointers like, okay, I think these areas are probably things we don't need, but it wasn't marked on the manuscript. It was just like a list of, I think this could probably go and this could probably go. I'd like a little less of this. And, these are a couple of things I would like for you to emphasize more. And then they just sort of left me to it. But I think, having had several books with her, she trusted me. She knew I could go in and I had already told her, look, I know it's too long. I know I have to do this. I needed to turn in what I had at that moment and just have somebody else say, yes, get rid of this, So, I wrote it during the pandemic too. And I had a really serious family emergency during that time. My daughter was hospitalized. So I wrote this book under extreme duress. And in fact, it feels like a miracle that it holds together. When I finally turned it in 6 months late, which I usually turn my stuff in early because I'm that really annoying person. But I turned it in 6 months late and I just thought, I don't even know if this is good. It just has to be done. I have to be done. It was just a really, really difficult time. And my editor wrote back after I'd done all those cuts, and she said, I cried at the end. You killed it. Aww. I loved it. I read it in a day and a half and then I cried at the end and I just went, oh my God. It was just such a relief. And the readers' reviews, I just thought some of these people are going to hate this book. They will. There'll be people that hate the book and that's okay. That's normal. But right now they're just loving it. And I'm just so thrilled. I cannot tell you. It is the biggest relief. It really is. It was a very, very challenging time. So
I can imagine it being such a relief to finally have it out in the world. Just that moment where you feel like you can breathe. It's finally done.
That was yesterday. So Tuesday was release day. And then yesterday, so I teach a grad course. So I had grades due on release day as well. So I had to grade 15 5-page samples. And then I had my book that's coming out next year due on the previous Friday. So literally I went back
gosh.
It was complete insanity. Yesterday I couldn't get off the couch. I think I did a little bit of social media and I just drooled. Like I had plans to go to the gym and do this and that. I could not do anything at all. It's just like, oh my God, what did I just do? I made it. By God, I made it. It's a miracle.
You took your victory lap and then you rested, which is important.
Yeah, today was a lot better. I was a lot more rested. I think I need a few weeks, but today was a lot better. So,
well, it's a lot of emotions, I imagine, to go through pub week. Pub day in itself, yes, but then the week is just like a lot. I don't speak of
It
experience.
is.
I,
It is.
I imagine.
Yeah, it's very, very exciting. It's thrilling. It's, this time, because I had this emotional backstory with what happened during writing this book, seeing the outpouring of my author friends was tears inducing for me. I mean, you guys came out of the woodwork everywhere. And I didn't have to ask. It just exploded on every author that I know on their page. And it was the most amazing thing to see. I mean, it was emotional and amazing. Yeah. So yeah, it's been a week. But a good one, a very good one.
It's fantastic.
I know we are just about at our half hour. So everyone, Strangers in the Night is now out in the world officially. And if you would like to get your own copy, please check out our show notes. You can click on the link to our bookshop.org and order your own copy. As always, bookshop.org supports our incredible writers. It does support the podcast, but most importantly, it supports all of the wonderful indie bookstores out there. And Heather, thank you so much. We're going to have one more book after that, and then we're coming to you. So that's just something we're going to have to plan.
We have to plan our whole East Coast trip.
Yeah, I'll prep the guest room. Yeah, come on
we'll
down.
Bring and the chocolate.
And, Michelle's good with the cleanup. I'm not. So just putting that out there.
I
am good
for
with
having me back again. You're always so gracious, and this I always have a great time talking with you both. So
thank you.
I love having you on. I look forward to it.
Me too.
Thanks so much. Enjoy the rest of your weekend and week, and enjoy it.
And get some rest.
Thank you.
Have a good night. Bye.
Good night.